After 1845, Ireland began to starve due to the blight hitting the potato crop. In this video, we're going to look at the reaction of the government to this suffering, and we're also going to analyse some of the suffering endured by the poor Irish people during our darkest hour. We will be looking at the reaction of the government, Rialtas government. Now, it's important to know that the government at the time was not in any way democratic or representative of the people. Undemocratic, neamhaonlach. Undemocratic, neamhaonlach. Ireland did not have a parliament in Dublin or Belfast. We were ruled at the time from the Westminster Parliament in London due to the Acht an Aontais, the Act of Union, Acht an Aontais, which came into effect in 1801. This act united Ireland and Britain as one country, an Ríocht Aontaithe, the United Kingdom, an Ríocht Aontaithe. Most Irish were Catholics, and the British didn't allow the poor Catholics to vote, so the Westminster Parliament was mostly made up of wealthy and elite Protestant landowners, and they couldn't care less about Ireland. Even the members of Parliament that represented Ireland were from the Anglo-Irish fraternity, Angla Éireannach, Anglo-Irish, Angla Éireannach. The Acht an Aontais was brought in to increase smacht. Smacht is control. Smacht. It was brought in to increase control due to a series of failed rebellions at the end of the 1700s. So when we look at what the government did in relation to the famine, remember, I'm referring to a British government sitting in Westminster, not an Irish government sitting in Dublin or Belfast. As Ireland starved, the government did not want to interfere in what they saw as economic and divine destiny. This approach was known as laissez faire. They strongly believed in the free market, faire varga, the free market, faire varga. So basically that meant tugga ocras dóibh. They were left to starve. Tugga ocras dóibh. At this time, the Irish people did not need lessons in free market economics. They needed help to prevent them from starving to death. The government did import maize, otherwise known as Indian corn, because Native American Indians were the first to discover and use corn in an effective way. Arúr Indiach, Indian corn. This was imported, but most Irish people didn't know how to cook this, as it was completely unfamiliar to them. The government did introduce a series of public works, Ibricha Publi, public works, as a way to offer employment to people so that they could pay for food to feed themselves and their families. But much of this work was backbreaking, incredibly hard work, and in some cases utterly pointless. For example, the building of roads to nowhere. Pointless. Fánach. A road to nowhere. Níl in non dóibh ach tep. Níl in non dóibh ach tep. A lot of people were just too weak to work in any way effectively. Log is weak, and rólog is too weak. Bhí siad rólog leis an obair a sheasamh. They were too weak to survive the work. There were many reports of people literally just dropping dead during the public works and en route. Evictions were all too common during the famine, as poor Irish farmers struggled to pay their rent due to crop failure. To evict is díbear. Díbríoch iad. They were evicted. Díbríoch iad. Chuir siad amach as a gcuid tithe iad leis an lámh loighder. They were put out on the side of the road forcefully. Chuir siad amach as a gcuid tithe iad leis an lámh loighder. And people would literally be wandering the roadside, taobh an bhóthair, by the roadside, taobh an bhóthair, with many living and dying in ditches. Diag is a ditch, diag. Another feature of the famine was the workhouse, teach na mocht. The workhouse, otherwise known as the poorhouse, teach na mocht. Bocht means poor, and a pauper is bochtán. Bochtán. People would normally go to the workhouse when they were truly desperate. Bhí siad beo bocht. They were truly desperate. Bhí siad beo bocht. In the workhouse, you would get basic meals and discipline was strictly enforced. Families were split up with differing sections for men, women and children. It was only ever meant as a last resort and was built and maintained to be deliberately unattractive. Nor a hain an chuis go cnáv na hilna. This means as a last resort, or literally when the reasoning goes too close to the bone. Nor a hain an chuis go cnáv na hilna. As the famine wore on, soup kitchens became more available, but sometimes this involved trading your fate for food, as some Protestant organisations offered food on the basis that recipients renounce their Roman Catholicism and become Protestant. The Irish for a soup kitchen is teach anra. Teach anra. Those who availed of this exchange of fate for food were known as soupers, or in other words, a traitor. Fealtor, a traitor. Fealtor. It's often said that during An Gorta Mór there were 3 stages to the suffering. The first stage was uver, which is pride, where the Irish people who were suffering would deliberately not seek help or refuse it. The second stage was édóchas, despair. Édóchas. This was when reality began to set in, as fever, dysentery and death became more common. Feverous is fever, feverous. Dineracht is dysentery, dineracht. And boss is death, boss. The third stage was glacca, acceptance, glacca, where Irish people just accepted their fate. Cinnúint, fate, cinnúint. As I make this video a century and 3/4 on from our darkest hour, I find it truly astonishing that a green and fertile land, which was at that time an integral part of the wealthiest and most powerful empire in the world, saw millions of its citizens starve, suffer and emigrate. But it did happen, and we must never, ever forget it. Join me for my next video, where I'll be looking at the journey that so many emigrants faced on the Atlantic Ocean aboard famine ships, and we'll discover why America, not the UK, was truly a land of opportunity for the Irish. Slán go fóill agus ná déan dearmid.